Thank you so much. I want to thank the CJF and more specifically the Gala Committee, David Walmsley and Maureen Shaughnessy-Kitts and Natalie Turvey for selecting me for this tribute. Of course, I have to thank Peter Mansbridge for those lovely remarks, and more importantly, I think I speak for everyone in the room for his decades at the CBC, serving as a beacon. Yes. Serving as a beacon for anchors across the continent, speaking truth to power, calm to panic. I know this nation has come to depend on you to guide it through times of difficulty and times of joy. And I know she will miss your presence. It is such an honor to receive this award, especially as somebody who's not Canadian. Somebody born in New York and raised in Philadelphia. Confession time now. I was 7 during the American bicentennial and living in Philadelphia, the heart of the democracy in which I was raised. So it was interesting when a few years ago I began doing some genealogical research and discovered that many of my ancestors, the Huff family, fought in the Revolutionary War. The surprise was that they fought for the British, and then they fled to Canada. And they continued to fight on your side in the War of 1812. This was, of course, something of, you're whistling. Yes. This was something of a rude awakening for a Philly boy to learn. Now, of course, I knew of my Canadian roots. My mother was born in Ottawa. Her family came to the U.S. When she was a child. My grandfather, Everett Palmatier, who's no longer with us, he fought with the Royal Canadian Navy during World War II. He served on the HMCS Cobalt, a Flower-class corvette that participated in escorting convoys in the Atlantic. His wife, give it up for Grampy, yeah. His wife, my grandmother Helen, she worked as a confidential secretary for the Canadian government. My Grampy's brother, my great-uncle Edwin Palmatier, a tail gunner, was shot down and killed by the Luftwaffe in World War II. There's a lake named after him somewhere in Canada. In January 1917, 100 years ago this year, my great-great-grandfather, David Dyson, a pickle and vinegar merchant, was the mayor of Winnipeg for 4 days. He lost the recount. That's a true story. And now if I were Tom, I would make a joke about how Peter Mansbridge covered the recount. But I am not, so I shall not. Grammy and Grampy and Uncle Edwin and David Dyson are all no longer with us, but I did bring my mother here tonight. Flew her up from Philadelphia. And I do want to take a moment to honor her for not only having been a loving and selfless mother, but for having instilled in me concepts of compassion and decency. I hope they have shaped the way I live, and also I hope they shape the way that I am a journalist. So thank you, Mom. I love you. I would also be remiss if I did not take a moment to thank another great son of Canada, a mentor to so many of us who had the pleasure of working with him at ABC News, my former boss, the late, great Peter Jennings. He was a tireless and fearless and obstinate boss, and he taught me so much about the world and the world of journalism. And the world is lesser for his passing. As for this award, I look at the list of prior honorees, Tina Brown and Sir Harold Evans and Malcolm Gladwell and Robert McNeil and Morley Safer and Graydon Carter. It's pretty good company. But I have to say the ones who mean the most to me of all those who have received this award are the 2012 posthumous tribute to Jennings, and also in 2013, the one that went to the man who did more to make me a journalist than anyone else, the late, great David Carr, who was honored in 2013, 4 years ago. I like to think that David and Peter right now are watching me and watching this presentation, frustrated that they can't break through to criticize me, tell me what I'm doing wrong, make sure that I'm not letting anything go to my head, and don't worry, guys, I got the lesson. You taught me well. I also want to say, and I think we all know this in journalism, there's no me. I get the award, but you saw Jeff Zucker, and you saw Van Jones, and you saw Anderson Cooper. there. I have three of my staffers with me here today: John Robinson, Jessica Stanton, and Lauren Protapis. It is a huge team effort, from the lowest intern to the support I get from Jeff Zucker and John Martin and Jeff Bucas. None of this is possible without all of them. So this is for everybody, including the three I brought with me today. And I think we all know that it's a huge team effort. And people like me and Peter, we get the applause for it, but it's all of you. In 3 days, I'm going to be giving a commencement address, the first one I've ever given, at my alma mater, Dartmouth College in New Hampshire. And I've been thinking a lot about what President Eisenhower told students in the 1953 commencement address. And he said, and this is in the height of the Cold War and McCarthyism, and he told the students, don't join the book burners. Don't think you are going to conceal faults by concealing evidence that they ever existed. How will we defeat communism unless we know what it is and what it teaches? And why does it have such an appeal for men? Why are so many people swearing allegiance to it? And we have got to fight it with something better, not try to conceal the thinking of our own people. They are part of America, Eisenhower said. And even if they think ideas that are contrary to ours, their right to say them, their right to record them, and their right to have them at places where they are accessible to others is unquestioned, or it isn't America. And I know you feel the same way in Canada. And this was Eisenhower at the height of the Red Scare and the Cold War. And he was arguing that communists should be able to debate what they believe. And I think about this battle place of ideas that Eisenhower talked about. I think about it a lot at different times. I think about it when I get tweets or angry messages from liberals telling me not to put Republicans or Trump supporters on my shows. And I wonder, using Ike's words, how are you going to win an election against Donald Trump and Trumpism unless you know what it is and what it teaches, as Eisenhower said? And why does it have such an appeal for men? Why are so many people swearing allegiance to it? And for those in journalism who don't understand the appeal of President Trump and the 62,979,636 Americans who voted for him, it's important to try to understand the phenomenon that so many of us failed to see coming. If you strip away the falsehoods and the bigotry and the occasional indecency, and we'll get to that later, but if you strip those away, there are propositions that are completely legitimate: fixing a broken system in Washington, making sure the elites and the government do more to protect American jobs and lives and livelihoods. And we in the media need to rise to this moment and allow these disrupting debates to happen and let the best ideas win on this battlefield of ideas. You knew there was a but coming. But all that said, I am gravely concerned about the weapons being deployed by President Trump and forces allegiant to him in this battle place of ideas. I'm concerned about the lies and the smears. I'm concerned about the moments of indecency. And for this audience especially, I'm referring, of course, to his calling stories he doesn't like, ones that are entirely 100% accurate, calling them fake news, and thus trying to undermine the Fourth Estate with a large segment of the American and the Canadian population. One example. On January 12th, a team of reporters, including me, Jim Sciutto, Evan Perez, and Carl Bernstein, reported this story. It started classified documents presented last week to President Obama and President-elect Trump included allegations that Russian operatives claimed to have compromising personal and financial information about Mr. Trump. Multiple U.S. officials with direct knowledge of the briefings tell CNN. The allegations were presented in a 2-page synopsis that was appended to a report on Russian interference in the 2016 election, and it went on from there. There's not one word of that story that's inaccurate. Not one word. We heard former FBI Director James Comey testify about it today. His written testimony submitted yesterday made a reference to it. And yet this story, 100% accurate, is the first story President Trump used to attack CNN as fake news. Fake news before then is a term that used to refer to actual fake news, such as The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, or more nefariously, the nonsense that there was a satanic pedophilia ring in a pizza parlor in Washington, D.C. linked to Hillary Clinton. That's what fake news used to be. Now fake news is stories President Trump doesn't like, even though they're true. And he does not like a lot of them. And yes, while there have been some minor media missteps, almost all of the stories he's called fake news have been 100% accurate. Now look, you know this. Every politician lies. Hillary Clinton said that Comey said her answers were truthful. No, he did not. Barack Obama claimed if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. But the sheer number of falsehoods and factual flip-flops coming from this White House is staggering. NATO's obsolete, now it's not. Jobless numbers are bogus, now they're real. And what's worse, we have a situation where prevarications are not only supported by the administration and its allies in the media, but this dark army of Twitter and Facebook trolls and meme creators here and abroad who work to undermine the work and the reputations of those who either oppose the president and his policies within the party or the Congress, or those of us in the media who are attempting to provide basic, nonpartisan guidance on what's true and what's not, while also standing up for fact and decency. Now, the great discomfort here for Americans is that we want our leaders to be credible. The great discomfort for journalists is that if a president declares war on truth, those who try to stand by truth and defend her are then labeled partisans and biased. Now, we're not supposed to be fighters on the battlefield. We're not the opposition to President Trump. We're not the resistance. We're trying to figure out the way to cover this new world, however, where fact and decency often seem to mean so little. And I do think that we as journalists need to defend fact and decency. That said, it's a tough line to walk. Sometimes journalists allow themselves to get swept up and emotional. We can't have that. We can't have a world where we're the opposition. We're not the resistance. We in the Fourth Estate, we need to rise to the occasion of this challenge. And by that, I don't only mean that we need to work harder than ever to avoid the kinds of mistakes that have forever undermined our profession. We need to get key facts right. But also, we need to refrain from sharing every emotion the moment we experience it on Twitter. We need to understand and consider the low regard so many members of the public have for us, and work hard to be fair to all points of view, even the points of view of those people who are attacking us and attempting to undermine us. Not in what they're doing, but when they are proposing other policies and issues. I want to say one thing about the nefarious army of Twitter trolls. Tom Friedman writes in his new book, Thank You for Being Late, about the advances of technology compared to the human ability to adapt to these changes. So this is all from his book, but it's interesting. The chart of technology looks like this. It just goes up in a steady course. You know, you have the wheel is here, the fire's here, the microwave is here, and then we're here now. It just jutted up. We're way behind as a society, however, when it comes to adapting to that. I recently read that the average smartphone is millions of times more powerful than all of NASA's combined computing in 1969. So whereas technology went like this and then went up, the ability of mankind to adapt to it is still just parallel with it. So when your Uncle Albert is sending you Facebook articles from the Denver Guardian about an FBI agent who was suspected in a Hillary email leak and was found dead, well, I'm just sharing it. And he spreads the story using fake social media accounts. That's because your Uncle Albert or your Aunt Agnes are here and the technology is here and they don't understand. They don't understand that their ability to adapt to where media is way beyond where media is. And I've seen senators and members of the House, although I'm sure this doesn't happen in Canada, but I'm sure it doesn't. But to the South, I've seen members of the House and Senate invoking websites that are not real websites, not just on the right, but on the left. Recently, a congressman Jason Chaffetz of Utah, a Republican, announced he would be leaving Congress, and Congresswoman Maxine Waters, a Democrat of California, who's been lionized by Democrats recently, she went on MSNBC and she said of Jason Chaffetz, quote, "There are those who think that he in some ways has some connections to what's going on in the Ukraine and perhaps in Russia itself and knows something about all of this. I don't really know, I can't say, but he's strange in the way he's conducting himself. Maybe Chaffetz thinks that if he rolls out and points to the fact that something's going on with Flynn, that somehow this will raise Chaffetz above maybe what connections he may have with the Kremlin. We need to keep an eye on him," unquote. This is crazy. This is a member of the United States Congress who is being lionized as Auntie Maxine by the left. And to point out that this is happening on the left is not to promote a false equivalence that it's equal with the left and the right. Obviously, it's this happening on a much greater scale from a much larger platform on Pennsylvania Avenue on the right. But lies are lies. And irresponsible fact-free speculation does not become less irresponsible because of a conspiracy peddler's political affiliation or gender or anything else. I didn't become a journalist to be a fact checker or a truth squatter. I became a journalist to try to hold people in power accountable, to try to tell stories other journalists weren't, and to try to have serious discussions about the way policies impact people's lives. It's probably the same reason most of you became journalists. I didn't become a journalist to become a meme on Twitter or to watch a younger, far better looking man portray me on Saturday Night Live. Although, thanks for that. But there's a lot of attention on us today as the Fourth Estate finds itself trying to stand up for basic standards of decency and truth. And while it's important that we not take the bait and we not become the resistance, we not become the opposition that Bannon and Trump would like to cast us as, thus delegitimizing ourselves, we can't ignore the fact that it's important to stand up for certain things. We can't sway in the other direction. We can't pretend that lies don't need to be called out the moment they happen. We can't shrug and talk about how a politician's supporters don't care about behavior that is empirically offensive, so who cares if it happens? We can't lower our standards that we have as a society just so that we have access to big-name interviews. We have to be able to look our kids in the eyes. We can't lower our standards because of attrition or exhaustion or because colleagues are making other decisions or because Fox or Breitbart or trolls will lie about us. It's a time for all of us in the Fourth Estate, and indeed all of us in North America, to stand up for what we know is right: objectivity, truth, decency, facts. My late grandmother, Helen McDowell Palmatier, who was born 101 years ago in Winnipeg, she was an expert on Sir Winston Churchill. So if you'll permit me, I want to end this by quoting him. Churchill once said, quote, "A free press is the unsleeping guardian of every other right that free men prize. It is the most dangerous foe of tyranny. Under dictatorship, the press is bound to languish. But," Churchill said, "where free institutions are indigenous to the soil and men have the habit of liberty, the press will continue to be the Fourth Estate, the vigilant guardian of the rights of the ordinary citizen." Thank you so much for this honor. I really appreciate it.